Boom, 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 boom. A side, B side. What side are you on?
Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I sure would like to make a podcast. I've got so much to say about blank. Well, if you haven't heard about Anchor, you really should. It is the easiest way to make a podcast, and it's absolutely free. All right, I'm going to tell you why it's so easy. Okay, so with Anchor, there's creation tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many others. And you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Trust me, I'm so excited about this. You can be too. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. All right, welcome back to A-Side, B-Side Podcast. I'm Brooke. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing well, and you?
So last week was Christmas, and we didn't do a whole lot. We kind of didn't go traditional. I didn't even decorate this year for Christmas. We had Mexican food. I didn't get to see my oldest till after. All things considering, pretty good. How about you?
I'm just waiting for the holidays to be over. This is not my favorite time of year when it's cold and we're in lockdown up here in Minnesota. So just kind of waiting until the sun comes up soon.
Does the sun ever shine in Minnesota?
Doesn't feel like it right now. I mean, it's real gray. Like the sun will come up and it'll just get a slightly different color outside, but it's just cloud cover. So it's not like you really get to see the sun some days, and that gets real frustrating. And of course, it's some of the shortest days of the year, so it's like the sun just makes like a cameo appearance.
What about snow like happening right now? Did you guys get hit with that snowstorm?
Oh yeah, we definitely had a white Christmas. We've had like last week probably every other day we get some sprinkling of snow. We got some this morning. We're supposed to get some tomorrow, I think. So it's just kind of been consistent. Everything's white and frozen, and that just adds to the sort of like monochrome, like hothness of what's going on.
This is not a serial killer we have referenced, but
We'll talk about your all-time transitions.
I know, right? I know. So, of course, we talk about serial killers here a lot, but the goal here is to talk about stories that you don't normally hear. Well, this is a story you probably didn't hear until recently when he was caught this year, Samuel Little.
I can still say I haven't heard his name because I missed that.
So he was caught a few months ago, I believe it was. And he was caught like in the summer, I believe it was. And of course, we talked about the Grim Sleeper and the fact that it's more rare to hear of a black serial killer. Well, Samuel Little is also a black serial killer, and he has now been deemed by the FBI as the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history.
Congratulations, Sam.
Yeah, go big or go home.
I guess.
He confessed to over 90 murders. He was serving multiple life sentences for
90.
That's what he's confessed to.
Wow.
They have proven 3. He was actually serving 3 life sentences for 3 deaths. Like I said, the FBI has deemed him as the most prolific serial killer in history. He's 80 years old, and they just pronounced him dead today.
Wow. He certainly wasn't executed. That would be too quick.
No, they have not determined an official cause of death yet. Of course, they're going to take their time. It's COVID. They're going to do an autopsy and all that, but 80 years old, I'm sure he didn't look like he was in the best of health anyway. Mm-hmm. But at least they caught him before he died.
So, like, from a numbers standpoint, if, Mr. Little was to off himself, does he get to count that?
I guess so.
Huh.
Yeah. So you remember the Grim Sleeper, he took pictures of all of his victims.
Yeah.
Samuel Little, he drew for the FBI, he drew for authorities all of his victims by memory.
So he could have just become like a police sketch artist instead of a serial killer.
or both.
Yeah, I guess. He just was doing it in reverse.
Yeah.
Not like, here's the guy we want to find. It's like, here's the guy I killed.
So you found me, so let me draw this for you. Yeah. Yeah, I know. But that just came down. So I wanted to make sure that we mentioned that. And again, like I said, when you hear of serial killers, especially in mainstream media, of course, you hear about the Ted Bundys and the Ed Geins, and the John Wayne Gacy's. But you don't hear about the Lonnie Franklins and the Sam Littles. And you see both of them are so prolific in numbers that it's like, oh my gosh. But also the victimology, their victims were Black victims. So they, of course,
we're not getting
not as
investigated.
Right, not as valued. Switching it up on you again on a more positive note.
Right.
Have you seen the seen the new Wonder Woman?
I have. I actually I think I watched it on Christmas Day.
Okay.
So maybe it was the day after Christmas. I don't know. All the days tend to blend together.
Yeah.
I thought it was good. I mean, I
it's not the first one.
I said it was good. I liked the first one a lot more.
Yeah.
I just felt like bringing back Chris Pine's character was just
it was cheating.
Really like we didn't like. I don't think there was this big need for him to come back and like have some sort of. It's just kind of. Then we did the whole thing again. It was like whatever. Yeah, it just
felt like a cheap trick.
Yeah, it felt like a distraction. It's like I don't know that it added all that much to the movie that couldn't have been. That role could have been played by. I mean, I just didn't really add a lot.
Yeah.
So, and I love Chris Pine. Like I mean, one of the movies that I forgot to return to Redbox, and so I end up owning at a very expensive price down the line, was the Chris Pine, Reese Witherspoon, and
Tom.
Tom. Yeah, Tom. He played Bane. He was in Mad Max.
Yeah.
He played a very young clone of Captain Picard in arguably the worst Star Trek.
Hardy.
Tom Hardy, yeah. And I'm trying to think of the name of that movie because I have it on DVD because I forgot to return it. And I love Chris Pine, so I was excited. This Means War is the name of the movie.
Yes.
And it's a very fun romantic comedy, which is also slightly an action movie. And it really deals with something that I'm sure we've all had to go through. It's trying to, balance dating two people at the same time while they're trying to kill you.
I mean, like, that's a typical Thursday.
I mean, yeah. I mean, boy meets girl, girl meets other boy. Both other boys are spies. I've seen it 1,000 times, but I thought this one had a new twist on it. So I just didn't feel like Chris Pine, like that character, having that guy come back. It was like they were just trying to shoehorn a romance angle in there, but then like not really do anything with it. I thought that they horribly underused Kristen Wiig's character. I felt like there could have been a lot more there. But maybe that's just because I've been waiting for this movie for like a year and a half, thinking they were going to have these epic battles, and they really only had a couple.
What did you think of Kristen Wiig as a villain?
I mean, they also really, like, there was the opportunity to really make it sort of to make her the bad guy, but I don't think they didn't think anyone would believe Kristen Wiig was like full on bad.
Right.
So they kind of did this like tortured soul overcome. It was like a really vanilla version of Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman from Batman Returns. And that, I guess it felt like there could have been a lot more to it.
I will say Pedro Pascal always plays an amazing role, always does an amazing job. He's an amazing bad guy.
Yeah. I totally forgot he was, I like am watching the movie and all of a sudden he shows up and I'm like, hey! Totally spaced that.
So I thought it was decent. I do like the first one much better. I
Mhm.
will say this, no spoilers. Just like you would a Marvel movie, sit through the entire thing
Yeah,
because end credits are a thing now.
and everything. I mean, we were at work tonight. We had the TVs going, so while we're getting food out the door, and the new Jumanji movie was playing, and then there was a after credit scene in the new Jumanji movie. So
Yes.
it's like everybody's doing it. So you gotta. And the thing is, I used to love sitting through the credits and seeing all those names because I always dreamed that my name would be somewhere
Hmm.
in a movie production. And that's the great thing about acting is I can do that until I die. And if I have the right agent, I can just be a dead body after I'm a dead body. So I'm going to be in a movie someday.
Okay.
I'm going to be in the credits somewhere. Uh, but now you really do have to sit through and watch and like figure out who the best boy is and the gaffer and the first grip and second grip and all those really strange titles.
Don't you still have an IMDb page?
I do. Yeah, I do. I
Because you're
think I do.
famous.
I don't know
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, there it is. I pulled it up right there. Why is
No,
your picture not up there though?
you got to pay for it.
Oh.
Yeah. So all you really do need to do to get an IMDb page is be in any movie that's listed, and then you can add details. It's basically like you got LinkedIn, you got LinkedIn Pro or Plus or something, so
Right.
you get more
Yeah.
options. IMDb Pro is their thing. So if I were to pay for it, I could then upload a headshot and give myself a bio and everything.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
not something I've explored doing recently, but definitely have explored doing that in the past. And I kept trying to add my other credit to it, even though I was an uncredited extra, but it still counts because you can see me in a scene.
Hmm.
But they wouldn't let me. I have to pay money to add that credit too.
Well, boo.
Well, hey, it's neat to have one. And there are only a couple Adam Weingardens in the world. I am friends on Facebook with all of them.
Oh, nice.
Uh, and I am definitely not the most famous. There's a guy who was a college quarterback at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and now is a football coach at a pretty big high school in Alabama, and often is mentioned in the papers. And his kids go to sign to play big time college ball. So
Yeah,
uh,
but you're the only one on
probably not going to.
IMDb, so.
This is true. This is true. And there, I do still in the height of uh, egotism or narcissism, I still have a Google alert set up for whenever my name is mentioned. It's usually not me. But,
Did you see the new Mulan? Or well, it's been out for a while. I just saw it for the first time.
I did not. I read a lot about how things were going to change, um, and that there was some speculation that a lot of it was being influenced by the Chinese government, and
Mhm.
so it kind of just put a bad taste in my mouth. So having only seen the first one once, that was kind of in like the I was too old for Disney movies and my kids weren't born yet period. It was never really one that I was connected to.
First of all, you're never too old for Disney movies.
Touche.
And secondly, it's actually pretty decent. Like I really enjoy it because I went into it not thinking I was going to like it at all. And my oldest came home to visit and she's like, "Let's watch Mulan." And I was like for 2 days in a row we tried to watch it and she fell asleep both times, but that's
Oh,
okay. But I still managed to watch it and my youngest managed to watch it and we both agreed beautifully visually it's gorgeous. And the story was I mean it's considering the changes they wanted to put in place, it still follows the original story pretty closely.
hmm.
And I feel it was very female, which Mulan is female empowering anyway.
Yeah.
But I feel that this even more so was female empowering. And I really like that. And she didn't have to typically the Disney princess, she's got to have the man save her, which of course was never the thing for Mulan. And also, what's the other one? Brave, Merida,
Yeah.
and Moana. You've got this new age of Disney princesses that are strong, which I really appreciate. And
I mean, even in Tangled,
yeah,
like Finn is around, but she certainly, I don't remember the princess's name, but of course I remember the guy's name. Oh, how male. Um, but she's got the whole thing with the cast iron pan beating people up, and
Rapunzel. Wouldn't it be Rapunzel in Tangled?
yeah, that'd be Rapunzel. The national
With the hair, yeah.
with the hair, yeah. I'm so good with names.
Okay, speaking of Disney, have you seen Soul yet?
I have not.
Come on, Adam.
I know. I've told you, and I've been stuck in this really strange rut of just rewatching stuff and not really being open to new shows, which is, I think, very COVID related.
Well, let's get you out of this rut because.
I mean, I watched all The Mandalorian.
All right. Well, I've never seen it, so. But there's another. That's Pedro Pascal again.
Yeah, and it's very good. And in fact, if I'm sure there are people who are like, "Well, I'm not into Star Wars." I'm like, it's a story that just happens to happen in the Star Wars universe. It's just a really well crafted tale, and there's a lot of stuff in there for Star Wars fans. But you can go in knowing nothing about Star Wars, and it doesn't matter. You will enjoy the series.
All right, I'll try it.
I'm just saying, it's good.
All right. I think that's all I got for you.
That was a very quick episode.
And that's been your A-Side B-Side. Thank you so much. You can support the show on buymeacoffee.com/A-Side B-Side pod.
It's just 20 minutes of Brooke and Adam talking about their week.
All right. So this is episode number 25. And Adam, I know you love movies and you love acting. I'm going to take you back to old school Hollywood.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like, are we talking talkies or are we talking, like
a little bit of this, a little bit of that?
Okay.
So, all right. We're going to kick off with the B-side next.
This is Kevin Armstrong, your host for Movie Battle. Each episode, we take two films and put a superfan of each against one another to decide which one is best. The only rule we have is that you come correct. If you're interested in being a guest on Movie Battle, please check us out on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter.
Like I said, Adam, I think you'll really enjoy this because you love movies and acting. And even though you don't always know the names of people, you have seen a lot of movies and you're into older classics.
Yeah, I would say like my sweet spot is 1978 on, but I have found often that like there'll be movies or TV shows that I enjoy, then I find out that they're remakes or they're somehow connected with something that came before. And so that sends me back to learn more about those older things.
Sometimes you just need a good old-fashioned Hollywood scandal and murder to just bring it full circle. And Hollywood knows how to give us a dramatic death, and that's definitely no exception. It's probably one of the most Hollywood stories that you've never heard. Because when you think Hollywood, you think drama, you think excess, you think, all those things.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the story of Ramon Navarro. Jose Ramon Gil Samaniego was born February 6th in 1899 in Durango City, Durango, Mexico. His parents, Dr. Mariano San Maniego and Lenore Perez Gavilan. Ramon's ancestors descended from the Castilian town of Burgos to the Americas. There's a book called Ramon Navarro, a biography of the silent film idol by Alan Ellenberger. Alan says the Samaniegos were an influential and well-respected family in Mexico. Many Samaniegos had prominent positions in affairs of the state and were held in high esteem by the president. So we're talking about somebody that already comes from some money.
Yeah, just influential bloodlines.
Yes. Ramon's grandfather was a well-known physician in Juarez. Ramon's father was born in Juarez and attended high school in Las Cruces. And then he went to the University of Pennsylvania. Yeah, that one. Mm-hmm. And then he moved back to Mexico to Durango and he started a dental practice. In 1891, he married Leonor. The family estate was called the Garden of Eden.
Dang.
Mm-hmm. The Samaniegos had 13 children at that estate. That's a lot of children.
They're starting the cradle of civilization.
Right.
Or in this case, the cradle of situation.
The cradle of situation and civilization. Yeah. Perfect in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
The Samaniegos had Emilio, Guadalupe, Rosa, Ramon, Leonor, Mariano, Luz, Antonio, Jose, who unfortunately was stillborn, Carmen, Angel, and Eduardo. At the start of the Mexican Revolution, the family moved from Durango to Mexico City, back to Durango, and then eventually they escaped to Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. 3 of Ramon's sisters, Guadalupe, Leonor, and Rosa, went on to become nuns. Ramon was the second cousin of 2 Mexican actresses, Dolores Del Rio and Andrea Palma. So not only does he come from state influence and medical influence, he also has acting in the bloodline.
He's got some connections.
So around 1916, 1917, Ramon befriended Hollywood power couple Rex Ingram and Alice Terry. Now, have you heard of Rex Ingram?
The name sounds familiar, but then again, it's just a cool sounding name.
Well, if you do a deep dive into Rex Ingram, he is responsible for a ton of film. Some of the movies he's done, you might recognize. Let's see. Ben-Hur, which we'll talk about. The Prisoner of Zenda, maybe you've heard of.
That's not on the list.
Black Orchids, maybe not. Okay, anyway.
I heard of Ben-Hur, though.
All right, well.
Chariots and stuff.
At the time, he was an extremely powerful Hollywood director, and his wife was a top-notch actress, Alice Terry. Again, Ramon's name was Jose Ramon Gil Samaniego. But Rex and Alice said, hey, it's not like today where he could just be Jose Ramon Gil Samaniego.
Right. I mean, people still change their names today.
Right. But
it has to do with getting your Screen Actors Guild card, and there can't be any duplicates.
But nowadays, when you have actresses like Uzo Aduba, it's more common for people to not change their names like they used to.
Right.
But in the early 1900s, that name wasn't going to fly. And they said, you're going to have to change your name to something a little more Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And what he did was he chose the name Navarro after his friend, Gabriel Navarro. But when they were typing it up on his Screen Actors Guild card, they misspelled it. So instead of Navarro, it's Novarro. Navarro.
Mm-hmm. No.
Because, why would they want to spell it correctly?
Right.
So Ramon began acting in 1917, and initially it was just bit parts. He did what most actors do. He supplemented his income as a waiter, a singing waiter at that. You've been there.
Oh, yeah. Still sing for my supper when needed.
So soon as friends, actor and director Rex Ingram and wife Alice Terry began promoting him as a rival to Rudolph Valentino. I'm sure you've heard that name.
Yes, that's a name most people have heard of.
Yes. Hollywood heartthrob, Rudolph Valentino. Rex basically promoted Ramon and made him into a Valentino copycat, even down to forcing him to copying Rudolph's mannerisms, even down to like the way he combed his hair for publicity shots. There was this like particular Rudolph curl that was famous that Ramon started copying.
Of course, I'm sure he wasn't the only one.
Oh, I'm sure not. From 1923, he began to play more prominent roles. His role in Scaramouche, opposite Alice Terry, brought him his first major success and turned him into a household name. Ramon's greatest success came in 1925 in the original Ben-Hur. Now, most people, when they think of Ben-Hur, they think the 60s version?
Yeah, or even
The 40s,
50s.
Yeah. With what's his name? I can see his face.
Was that Charlton Heston?
Yes, no. Charlton Heston. Thank you.
Yeah.
And sometimes people don't realize that there was an original version, or there was a version before that in 1925, and this was with Ramon Navarro.
Yeah, when people complain about Hollywood just recycling stuff recently, it's like, guys, this is kind of what we've been doing.
Yeah, for many years. Many years. Well, the thing about him in Ben-Hur, initially he actually lost that part because producers liked a guy named George Walsh. Well, that production with George crashed and burned because they just said George was flat, and the studios took over, and they fired George, and they recast, and they brought in Ramon as Ben-Hur. George Walsh got real bitter about that one.
Yeah, no, it sounds a lot like we talked about Eric Stoltz and getting fired from Back to the Future.
Mm-hmm. So Ramon's choice of costume caused quite the stir. You see, his costume consisted of a series of tight, shiny, short outfits. Now, this is in the early 1900s, 1920s. That was very scandalous, but the ladies loved it.
Oh, yeah.
So
this is like a good, 30 years before Elvis is shaking his hips.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which was scandal at the time.
Exactly. So imagine on the big screen, he's wearing short shorts and they're skin tight. This is like,
well, it was a period piece, though, historically accurate.
If you say so. So, of course, this role and the outfit and just the scandal surrounding it cemented his status as a Hollywood hunk. Ramon was often shirtless in his roles, but there was a little Hollywood magic there as well, because even though he worked out and he had a trainer and he, had a good physique, well, Hollywood producers, they wanted him even more buff. So they used makeup to draw pecs and make his torso more chiseled, and they painted muscles on him.
Yeah, they gave him extra definition.
Yeah, which, it sucks, but it's nice to know they do it to men too.
I mean, it's probably sucked a lot less than having to work out extra. So
I'm sure.
I'm sure Ramon was like, "Oh, these are my options. I will take them, and I will enjoy the cheeseburger."
Ramon, like Tom Cruise, was actually pretty short for a male as well. He was only 5'6", so his co-stars, the male ones, usually would stand in ditches to match his height. So Ramon is now a Hollywood elite. He used a woman named Sylvia of Hollywood as a physical therapist. Sylvia wrote a tell-all book years later, and she claimed that Ramon kept his young, youthful look by sleeping in a coffin, but that's not true.
I mean, that's a good story.
Yeah, it is a very good story. He stays young by sleeping in a coffin? It's not true, though.
No. I mean, I roll around too much to sleep in a coffin. I'd end up outside the coffin. So
in 1926, Rudolph Valentino passed away. He was only 31 years old. He passed away of periodontitis, which meant Valentino's unfortunate passing was very good news for Ramon, because it quickly cemented him as Hollywood's leading Latin actor. And, well, basically, he was like the top leading man. He was only second to MGM's John Gilbert. So this is a big dude. Like, this dude is huge.
He's on top of the world.
He's on top of the world in golden era Hollywood. Ramon was popular as a swashbuckler in action films and considered one of the greatest romantic leads of his day. This is so crazy because I'm like, I've never heard of this dude. Like, I've heard of Rudolph Valentino. I don't even heard of John Gilbert. I've heard of Alice Terry and Rex Ingram, but I had never heard of Ramon Navarro for him to be so huge.
Yeah, I had no idea.
He appeared with Norma Shearer in The Student Prince in Old Heidelberg in 1927. He appeared with Alice Terry in Lovers, also in 1927, with Joan Crawford, who, of course, we know the story of Mommy Dearest with Joan
Mhm.
Crawford. And then, of
Yeah.
course, the huge feud between Joan Crawford and Betty Davis, which is
Mhm.
legendary. So
There
we
there
know,
was a whole TV series about that recently,
yes,
wasn't there? Yeah.
yes. So
I
we
think it
know
was called like The Feud.
Yeah, I think it was. So we know Joan Crawford, huge leading lady. So he started with her and across to Singapore in 1928. Anita Page in The Flying Fleet in 1929. Greta Garbo in Mata Hari in 1931. These are big, huge actresses. So that
Yeah.
shows you his status. He frequently starred with Dorothy Jordan and Renee Adore. He made his first talking film. Remember, I said we kind of go both. He made
Mhm.
his first talking film starring as a French soldier in Devil May Care in 1929. It really didn't do well. It was not well received. Um, he starred with Dorothy Janis in The Pagan in 1929, with Myrna Loy in The Barbarian in 1933, and he starred opposite Lupe Velez in The Laughing Boy in 1934. The Laughing Boy, unfortunately, was a bit of a humiliation for Ramon. It wasn't just the fact that there were two actors of Mexican descent playing Navajo people. On top of that, the critics derided how bad the wig, how bad his wig was, and they talked about his aging features. Remember, he started in 1916, 1917. This is now the late, mid to late, or the early to mid 30s. So he's been acting for what, 20 years now?
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
about.
and 20 years of age is going to show at some point.
Right.
We're
It's
not
not
all Paul Rudd.
exactly. And it's not like today where they can do the digital editing.
Mhm.
So again, I hate it for him, but at the same time, they do this to women all the time. You hear about
Mhm.
women not getting certain roles because they're a certain age. So
Yeah.
I hate that they did it to him, but I'm like, well, at least they did it to a man.
Like lead actresses suddenly hit a certain age and then they can only play grandmothers or moms.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's weird.
So audiences seem to agree with the critics, and the film was another bust. So now he's got a couple of busts under his belt. In 1935, his contract with MGM was not renewed. In fact, they offered him $19,000 to break it, which today would be about $361,000.
Oh, wow.
They offered him that $19,000 and said, "Here, take this and leave." I'm
Dang.
It's not like today where you can be Tom Cruise and have flop after flop and then they still keep you around.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's also helping pay for flop after flop.
True.
And he can find, I mean, this was back before it's like baseball before free agency. Like you signed with a studio and then you could only make movies for that studio. So if there was a better script somewhere else or a better movie that you wanted to do, tough luck, buddy. You're MGM forever. So
Yeah.
you better hope MGM finds some scripts for you. So it was a very different time.
Very different. And MGM just said, you know what, we're going to cut our losses. Here you go. Here's your 19 G's, or like I said today, $360,000, which isn't a lot, but it was then.
I don't know. I'm still going to take $360K if anybody's handing it to me.
Heck yeah. You want me to what? Okay, I'm out. So Ramon continued to act sporadically, appearing in films for Republic Pictures. He was in a Mexican religious drama and a French comedy. In the 1940s, he had several small roles in American films, including We Were Strangers in 1949. In 1958, he was considered for a role on the television show The Green Peacock, but that project never came to fruition. He had an unsuccessful Broadway tryout in the 60s. So he just kept himself busy on television, appearing on NBC's The High Chaparral in the late 60s. Ramon tried for a comeback in London, doing a stage production of his movie, The Prisoner of Zelda, which I mentioned earlier, which is a Rex Ingram film.
Yeah.
But when the audience saw how much he had changed, they were aghast not only at his aging face, but his pudgy physique.
Yeah. Well, that'll happen when you
When you
40
age.
years.
Yeah, I know.
We didn't
So,
have Tybo and stuff.
right? No Billy Blanks in
No
the
Billy Blanks
40s.
coming around. Billy Blanks, that's another guy who hasn't changed at all. It's him and Paul Rudd, fountain of youth somewhere.
So, along with his declining looks, were his declining acting skills. He was not the leading man that he once was. So, at the peak of his career in the late 1920s and early 1930s, Ramon was earning more than $100,000 per film, which
Wow.
today would be like $1.5 million per film.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Right. So, I could see him being a little insulted when they were like, here's 19 grand when he was making $100,000 a film.
Yeah, it's like, this is what we found in the couch. Can you go now?
Yeah. But Ramon was smart with his money. He invested his income. Remember, he comes from money, so he knows what to do with it. He
And
invested
there was
his
no Amazon to spend stuff on. So
right. So he invested some of his income in real estate and in his Hollywood Hills residence. It was one of the more renowned designs of Lloyd Wright, who, if you've ever heard of Frank Lloyd Wright, the prominent architect, his son, Lloyd Wright, is the one that designed Ramon's house. So when his career ended, he was still sitting pretty comfortable. He's still sitting pretty. All while Ramon was dealing with the rise and fall of his movie and TV career, on the backside, he was facing his personal demons. You see, Ramon was homosexual, but he was also conflicted because he was raised a devout Catholic, a devout Roman Catholic. So his struggle led to severe drinking issues. And in the early 1920s, before his rise to stardom, Ramon was romantically involved with a composer named Harry Partich. Well, we've heard this happen before. This kind of happened with Meghan Markle when she started to get popular on, what's the show? I used to watch it. Now I can't think of it.
Scandal?
No, Meghan Markle was never on Scandal. It was the Law Show.
I don't know. The Law Show. It's a horrible title.
It was
Suits.
Yes.
Suits. Yeah.
So
look at that.
Meghan Markle was married to like a director, and then she started to become more famous on Suits, and then she dropped him.
Yeah.
So it happens. I'm
like a cheap
suit. So and that was just the first example I can think of. And no, I don't really like Meghan Markle, but it happens all the time. We hear this all the time. And so that was the case with Ramon. Once he started on his upward rise, he dropped the composer. So later he became involved with a Hollywood journalist named Herbert Howe, who was also his publicist in the late 1920s. I told you this is a real Hollywood type story.
Oh, yeah.
So the two had their relationship in plain sight. Herbert would write columns about his closest friend, Ramon, and those who were in the know knew that it stood for lover. The columns helped boost Ramon's career, and the studios really weren't concerned with the men and the relationship as long as they were discreet. The studios even helped to hide it by feeding stories to the press about Ramon dating starlets.
All right.
But the real kicker in all of this was that they were giving the stories to Herbert to write.
Who knew it was all a fake?
Right. But of course, this is Hollywood. So we need a tragic, bitter end. In 1928, after about 5 years together, the couple broke up. And I don't think it was mutual because Herbert wrote a scathing, vitriolic piece about Ramon. In the piece, Herbert called Ramon cold, cruel, and incapable of warmth. He wrote, quote, off screen, he is a theater with the lights out. Ooh. That is cold.
Yeah. I would assume that you don't want to piss off the person who writes your reviews.
Right? So
that seems like a bad choice.
From the sound of it, it seems as if Ramon is the one who ended things. Because Herbert did not seem very happy. Ramon, of course, was very upset by this article, and his response was to get as far away from it all as possible. He literally tried to become a monk, but they rejected him, telling him that they didn't think that a Hollywood star could be serious about the monastic life.
They were probably right.
Ramon. Ramon also had a relationship with a wealthy man named Noel Sullivan from San Francisco. So, quick side note: this was an era where a lot of celebrities were being accused of being communists, like Lupe Velez and James Cagney, which I know you know James Cagney.
Oh yeah.
Ramon, he did not escape the accusations. He and the others were accused of promoting communism in California after they attended a special screening of the film called Que Viva Mexico by a famed Russian filmmaker named Sergei Eisenstein. So in the late 1940s and 50s, after the decline of his career and increase in drinking, and all of this scandal with the communism and his love life, I mean, everything is just kind of spiraling here for Ramon. His drinking picks up as his career declines, and he becomes really well acquainted with the LAPD, because he had quite a few midnight run-ins and quite a few car accidents.
Ooh.
One car accident was so bad, he actually broke his ribs, injured his chest, lost his license. Also in the 1950s, Ramon began hiring sex workers. And this, my dear desktop detectives, is where the murder comes in. So on Halloween Eve, October 30th of 1968, Ramon received a phone call from Paul and Tim Ferguson, telling him that they received his phone number from their contact, Larry Ortega. Larry was another client at the Laurel Canyon Home for Sex. So the two brothers, 6'4", very handsome, asked Ramon if he was in need of their services that evening. Ramon said sure and invited them over. They were just his type. They were gorgeous, like Hollywood beautiful gorgeous. The two men, Paul 22, Tom 17, believed that there was a large sum of money hidden somewhere in Ramon's house. He was a top Hollywood star. They're like, he's got to be loaded, you know?
Somebody tells somebody else who tells somebody else, and suddenly we got this legend of a bunch of money.
Right. And he's got this gorgeous house. So they're thinking he lives in this beautiful home. There's money somewhere inside this home.
Or something worth getting.
Exactly. So the details of the night are a little mysterious, as both brothers told completely different stories. But this is what the prosecution believes happened. They believe that Ramon's last hours were terrifying. Paul, the older brother, claims that he was asleep. When he woke up, Tom told him that Ramon was dead. Tom, on the other hand, the younger brother, tells a very different story. According to Tom's testimony, he walked into Ramon's bedroom and he saw Paul. Now, I know this is a true crime podcast, but I do want to warn you. Okay. It does get a little graphic. So Tom said he walked into Ramon's bedroom and he saw Paul in the bed, and then he watched as Paul bludgeoned Ramon with a prop cane and demanded the money that he thought Ramon had. Prosecution accused the Ferguson brothers of torturing Ramon for several hours, trying to get him to reveal the whereabouts of his money. Ramon died from asphyxiation from choking on his own blood. The brothers then left with $20 that they found in Ramon's bathrobe. The brothers tried to cover up their crime. They tried to make it seem as if a female sex worker had been there by placing a condom in Ramon's hand, and then they wrote Larry Ortega's name on the sheets. They could have also intended it to make it seem as if Larry Ortega himself was responsible. The prosecution said it. They said both ways make sense. That's what they said in trial.
This doesn't sound like a really well thought out plan.
No.
All right, let's write this guy's name on the sheets because that's a thing people do.
Right.
Except it's not.
So the final piece of the cover-up was a disgusting message written on Ramon's bathroom mirror. Now, when I tell you it's disgusting, I am not kidding. And I'm reading the message for the impact because it needs to be, this is Ramon's story.
Mm-hmm.
And the full story needs to be told. But it also needs to be known that this is not cool. It's not okay. So the message, very grammatically incorrect, said, "Us girls are better than faggots." Finally, realizing that their clothes were a bloody mess, they ditched their clothing and raided Ramon's closet, stealing his clothes before leaving. Fortunately, their tactics did not work. And
so they left their clothes behind?
Yeah, they threw them out.
Wow, these guys are dumb.
They're very dumb. Yeah, very dumb. Especially, yeah, they're very dumb.
Wow.
So they were both arrested and convicted to long-term sentences, but both of them were released on parole. Now, remember, this happened on 1968. In the 70s, they were both paroled. They killed this man. They brutally killed this man, and they were sentenced to, years in prison. And for whatever reason, I couldn't find the reasons. They were both paroled in the 70s. But they couldn't keep themselves out of trouble.
No,
And
of course not.
they were arrested again for unrelated charges, and they both ended up serving more time for these unrelated crimes than they did the murder of Ramon Navarro. 30 years after the murder in 1998, Paul Ferguson, the older brother, finally admitted his fault in Ramon's murder. Tom Ferguson must have been haunted with what he had done because he committed suicide on March 6th of 2005. He went to a motel and slit his own throat. Paul Ferguson is a repeat offender. He received an 8-year sentence in 1987 for raping a 54-year-old woman. In 1991, he racked up even more charges. And at last check, from what I could find, he's still serving time for another rape. Ramon was buried in Calvary Cemetery in East Los Angeles. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Ramon's murder was briefly referenced on the 6th season of The Sopranos. The episode is titled Cold Stones, and it's following the violent murder of a closeted homosexual character. In late 2005, the Wings Theater in New York City staged the world premiere of Through a Naked Lens by George Barthel. The play combined fact and fiction to depict Ramon's rise to stardom and his relationship with Herbert Howe. And in 2015, the murder of Ramon was covered in the television series Aquarius in the episode titled Cease to Resist. And that is the true Hollywood story of Ramon Navarro. See? True crime's not new.
No, it's not. And there are some pretty horrible people through every decade of humanity. So it seems like these guys got a few more decades than they should have been allowed to have.
I just cannot believe that they were paroled within 10 years of murdering someone.
Yeah. Well, and you wonder if and I don't know the details. And as you mentioned, you couldn't find much detail, but you do have to wonder if the fact that if there was somebody felt like the murder of a homosexual man was not as
I wouldn't doubt that at all. It's the victimology of it. Yeah. The victim wasn't as valuable if it had been a white male or a white female.
Yeah.
The
would have been
outcome would have been different.
Story.
Yeah. A very tragic. It's like it's the most Hollywood story. It's so tragic. He had this rise to fame, had this beautiful career, and then this horrible ending.
Loses it all, and then still, I mean, even in the 60s, he was doing stuff. I mean, even that what you said in 1968, he was on an episode of a TV show. He was on I mean, I just went back and looked him up, and like he was on Bonanza in the Wild West. I mean, like he was clearly not the lead guy anymore, but he was still working.
Yeah. It's just, I'm surprised that with him being as big as he was, there's not been a movie made about him, because it seems, Hollywood loves a tragedy,
Yeah,
and it seems like, if they can make a movie about Ken McElroy from our last episode, it seems like Ramon would have gotten a movie.
yeah, but again, you wonder if it's
Yeah.
partly due to how a Latin actor versus a white actor, a homosexual versus a cisgendered person.
Yeah. Oh, me. But there you go. Little old school murder. Hollywood murder.
And now I want to go watch Ben-Hur.
The original?
I don't even know. Like, that's one of the challenges of older film stars like this. Like, just, I like I said, I started looking them up, and how many movies have this note by them that say lost film.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not like you can just go hit Netflix. Like, there were a lot of these films that people weren't thinking about keeping, or there were fires at the studio warehouse, or stuff just gets lost to history.
I would love to find the original 1920 version of Ben-Hur and see. And apparently there was like a version in like 1907, but that's crazy. But okay, so I just looked, Ben-Hur, A Tale of the Christ, starring Ramon Navarro. You can rent it on Apple TV. It's on Amazon. It's on Vudu. And it's also on YouTube. You can rent it for $1.99, or you can buy it, on and Fandango. So you can rent it on Apple, Amazon, Google, YouTube, Fandango, Vudu, or you can buy it on any of those as well.
There was a Ben-Hur in 2016.
I had no clue.
All right, I don't.
And one in 2010.
Like, it had Morgan Freeman in it.
That's wild.
Evidently, it did not do well, because neither of us have any recollection of that happening.
Right? Yeah, no. But I think I'm going to try to rent this one with Ramon Navarro. Check it out. But there you go. That, dear friends, is the B-side.
So, Brooke, as we have been talking about, I've been rewatching a lot of older shows, things that I've already watched before. And so that has influenced a lot of our episodes and a lot of the A-side. And it's doing it yet again. I have now successfully watched every episode of NCIS, which is, there's like 18 seasons. And I've gotten through all of those. And so I was in a real dark place.
That's a lot of Gibbs.
It's a lot of Gibbs. It is. It's a lot of Navy people getting killed. Very weird that there were that many, but I don't know. But I guess there's a lot of ships and they move things around a lot. But I was looking for something new to watch, and I don't know if you've noticed, but Netflix has this like watch something now button.
No, where is it? On the app?
Yeah.
Or on your computer?
You log in. So I usually watch Netflix on my Xbox or on my Roku. And on either one, you log in, and it literally is designed. It's like, I don't know what I want to watch, so I'm going to click this button, and it's just going to start playing something.
Oh, wow.
And then I can decide if I want to keep watching it, or I can just hit next, and it'll just start playing something again. So I've been using that a lot. And, usually it takes 2 or 3 times before I find something that like catches my eye. But I got started back into The Blacklist, which is a spy drama, started out in 2013 and stars James Spader.
Yes.
And James Spader has always held this weird spot in my mind. Like, I know he's famous and I've seen him in a lot of stuff. Like, I'm like, when he was, Ultron and Avengers Age of Ultron, I'm like, oh yeah, obviously James Spader. But then I could never really figure out like where or why he was famous. Like, he'd always been on television shows and stuff, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, Tom Cruise had his big break in Top Gun, or like Nicolas Cage was in Fast Times at Ridgemont, or Raising Arizona. But
I was gonna say he was not in
he
Fast
wasn't.
Times at
No.
Ridgemont High.
But like Sean Penn was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and Forrest Whitaker was, and I was like, okay, I know James Spader, and like I know the name, but I don't really like. It was always like, oh, James Spader's in this, but I was never like, oh yeah, this is when James Spader became famous. And so I started diving into James Spader and trying to figure out where, like in my brain, was just like, oh wow, they got James Spader to do a TV show. And then I'm like, well, yeah, he's done a lot of TV shows. He's not like this huge star. And I think it was that when I was a kid, I had seen Pretty in Pink and Mannequin, and he was right up there on like level.
I forgot he's a Mannequin.
Yeah, he's the guy. He's like the lead guy in Mannequin. He's the big jerk in Pretty in Pink, and he's like the guy in Mannequin. And Mannequin was one of those movies that I thought was a much bigger deal than it was. Like it was a good movie, but it wasn't. It was like a movie that we watched as a family a lot on like road trips, and it was one of those kind of like Batteries Not Included that we talked about a couple weeks ago, where I thought it was a much bigger movie than it turned out to be. It was very good. Also, I think I had completely forgotten that the Mannequin is Kim Cattrall. Yeah, I had totally forgotten that as well. He's in it as like he's not the lead guy. He's not the
Andrew
love
McCarthy
interest.
is the lead guy. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's like kind of like the main, like not really bad guy, but he's definitely not. He's a bigger part than I expected, and I had forgotten that he was in it. But so I started to think about, okay, so those two movies were in the 80s, and then he was on Boston Legal and The Practice in the early 2000s. But the movie that I remember, and the only movie that I ever remember seeing in the theater with James Spader in it, goes all the way back to the mid 90s and a sci-fi epic called Stargate.
Oh.
And I loved Stargate. It had Kurt Russell. It had James Spader. It was this amazing idea that somehow there are these portals all over the universe that you can go back and forth through, it was like a wormhole type of deal. Like it would go make traveling so much more simple. And I thought it was going to be like, this is going to turn into like Star Wars or Star Trek. There's going to be like 7 movies and we can go literally anywhere with all of these potential options and all these, and it didn't. I loved it, but again, it was 1994 and I was 13. So anything with space and aliens and laser pistols was probably going to be directly on my hit list as something that was really cool. However, it then went on to have an entirely different pop culture ascendancy that never really mentions the movie because it ignores the movie existed. It became the TV series Stargate SG-1, which then had like 3 spin-offs of its own. But that wasn't a sequel to the movie. They just took the idea from the movie and turned it into a television series and continued to build this amazing drawn-out universe. And it reminded me of one of your favorite shows, Brooke, that did the very same thing, was first a movie that didn't have a lot of acclaim and then was rebooted.
Can I guess?
As a television series. Well, yeah, of course you
It's Buffy.
Yeah, and Brooke, you are the biggest Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan that I have ever met. Even when I went to a convention here in the Twin Cities, comic convention years ago, and Spike, what's his actor's name? The actor that played Spike, James Marsden, was Marsters, not Marsden.
Yeah,
that's totally different. Yeah, Marsters. I got to see him speak, and I spent the entire time sitting there going, like, Brooke should really be here instead of me.
I would have fangirled so hard.
I mean, he did a great job, like, telling the story, and I then found out that he was doing the audiobooks for the Dresden Files at the time, too, which was like, well, that's a weird thing. I love those as well. So Buffy also did a great job of taking this idea that was a movie and turning it into a series, and then building an entire universe and expanding on it. And then I said, okay, that's 2.
And getting a spinoff of it.
and getting spinoff. So that's two really successful times when a movie became a series, and the series was way better than the movie was. Now, I think it's a lot closer line between the movie Stargate and the series Stargate SG-1 or any of its spin-offs. There's a little bit more, the line's not as definitive between the goodness and the badness. Whereas if you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the movie with Kristen Swanson and Luke Perry, I think, and then you watch the series,
and
there is no debating.
Paul Pee Wee Herman, what's his name? Paul
Rubens.
Paul Rubens, yeah.
If you look at that movie and the series, there's no debating which is the better content. The series is so much further. I mean, they even got away with doing musical episodes, which they brought that back to television. Gosh, thanks. Not something we really needed, but they got away with it because the series was so beloved.
They even got away with doing a completely silent episode. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. That one actually was clever. But you could tell at that point, they were just like, what can we do here? Like, how far will they let us push this? It's like that little kid who knows where the line is, but then realizes they crossed it. And it's just going to keep crossing it a little bit further, try something different, just to see when they're finally going to get in trouble.
Right.
When I was a teenager, I was notorious with my friend group of being able to talk myself out of grounding and back into grounding several times in the same conversation with my parents.
Wow.
I remember one time when we walked out of the house, and because I'd gotten to go out after I'd been grounded twice during the conversation. And my friend looked at me, he goes, I counted it. And that was 3 times you got grounded and 4 times you got out. And I don't know how you do that. And it makes no sense whatsoever. And I go, well, I just keep talking. Really just a war of attrition. If I just keep arguing, at some point, they're like, the best thing for the end this conversation is to send him away.
Okay. Can I tell you a really quick, fun side note?
Yeah.
So that episode of Buffy, that was the silent episode, the head whatever bad guy or whatever that made everybody silent, Doug Jones, who from, he was in The Shape of Water, he was the Silver Surfer. I mean, he does a ton of these roles where he doesn't talk, but he's always like the tall, lanky alien or creature or whatever.
He's killing it on Star Trek Discovery. And he was great as Abe Sapien in the first Hellboy movies. And way back when, he was one of our first interviews.
That's what I was going to say. What a cool guy he was.
Yeah, it was. He
was a very sweet guy.
And I think what movie he was doing, Jeepers Creepers?
No, I think he was doing Silver Surfer at the time, wasn't he?
No, I think it was some horror movie, because I was very uncomfortable with the topic. Because me in horror movies, I get scared. I feel like it was the one where he's like a scarecrow.
Okay, this would have been.
So it would have been 2007. Look at us doing just like an on-air production.
Yeah, no, 2007 was Silver Surfer. He had done Hellboy after or he was doing the video game for Hellboy, but 2007 was Silver Surfer. I'm almost positive that's why we talked to him.
Yeah.
He did Pan's Labyrinth before that.
Yeah, maybe that's probably what I was thinking of, because I did see that movie. It scared me a lot.
I bet that's what it was, because we did talk to him about a bunch of his other films. So I bet that's what it was. Yeah. But yeah, what a nice guy. Every time I see him in something, I'm like, he's a nice guy.
Yeah, no, and he was in the Hush episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah, it's really, I didn't get to interview that many people when we were doing. Because we were on the air that long and we didn't have a ton of interviews, but I do remember that one especially, and every time I've seen him since, it's been cool to see his success.
Sorry. Okay,
that's okay. No, it was good. It was a little memory lane. So once I started thinking about these movies that got turned into better television series, I had to do the thing that I always do and make a top 5 list. So I went through and started to research all of the movies that turned into TV shows. Now, sometimes we hear about like TV shows that have a movie later. That's relatively rare. Usually doesn't work out that well. Like we tried it with Sex and the City, and we tried it with X-Files
There's
couple
been
of times.
Several SNL characters that have had movies that were not good.
Yeah. And what I found is that if you're a successful cartoon in the 80s, 90s, or even in the 2000s, you're going to have a cartoon series that comes out after that.
Mm-hmm.
So I threw out all cartoons.
Okay.
I was like, there's too many. I gotta separate. I gotta step away from the cartoons. So it's got to be a series that had a movie first, but the series doesn't continue the story. It doesn't it's not a sequel. It is completely ignores the existence of preceding movie.
And you found 5 of them?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did. And actually there's one that does it twice. That is number 3 on my list. So this would toss, but saying it has to be a series that doesn't pay attention to the movie tosses out a lot of really good prospects. You look at something like Highlander, which whether or not you like swordplay or Immortals.
Oh man, the show was so good.
It was, and for a while it didn't really interact with the movie, but by the end they were basically like the last movie was the 2 guys. Yeah, so that one had to get tossed out. Loved it. The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which I still think they were going to reboot with River Phoenix, and then when River Phoenix passed away, then they tried to make it a TV series, but it was still it was a prequel, so that doesn't count.
Can we go back to Highlander real quick and just talk about how hot Adrian Paul was, though? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, he was a very attractive man. I mean, it's really it kind of, and I don't mean this to be mean to Christopher Lambert, because Christopher Lambert is also a very handsome man, but they're like, you tell me those 2 are cousins?
No.
No. That doesn't make a lot of sense. There's no way that those guys were cousins. And because there's just like no family resemblance at all there at all. So we got to toss out Highlander. Young Indiana Jones Chronicles got to get tossed out. I removed Fargo because even though Fargo it's just its own thing. Right. Each season is unique. It's like an art piece. It kind of does its own thing. So it really can't be compared to anything else. Ash versus the Evil Dead, which doesn't function completely as a sequel, but it totally is. And you can't have it without the movies. But then even the movies themselves were kind of sequels that didn't pay attention to the other movies, but then they did a little bit. So I had to toss that one out completely. So I give honorable mention to all of those. And out of my top 5, I struggled because I was going to put this one in there. This is the honorable mention, just missed the top 5. And it is Westworld. So Westworld was first a 1978 film starring Yul Brynner. Yeah, the King and I guy.
Oh, wow.
Set within the Westworld universe. The series on HBO completely ignores that happened and does a much better job of expanding on the universe of Westworld. Where they lost me and where they didn't get in the top 5 was the unevenness of season 2, and where they really tried to push those boundaries a little bit further. I think that the original source material gave them license to, so they just missed out in the top 5. So coming in at number 5 in the It Was a Movie, then had a series that completely ignored the movie existed rankings, which I'll turn that into an acronym later. Number 5 has the series completely wiped out most people's knowledge that it was even a movie because it became so popular, and it kind of transcended those entertainment and sport lines. And you'll even hear some of the catchphrases like clear eyes, clear heart, can't lose, or something like that. repeated by sports figures when they're doing their little nonsensical talks at halftime or after a game, and they're saying things like, well, we really put it 100% on the field and we wanted to make sure we gave it our all, and that's a good team over there, and that sort of thing. But they'll clear eyes, clear heart, can't lose. And it's Friday Night Lights. The movie for Friday Night Lights came out.
Oh, I forgot that was a movie for real.
Exactly. And everybody did, because first it was a movie, but it wasn't as good. So the series started in 2006, but the movie came out in 2004. And they were both directed by Peter Berg. But can you imagine like the character of the head coach being played by Billy Bob Thornton?
Oh my gosh.
Right? The series has become so iconic, and the lead actor who was in Kyle Chandler, who was in a bunch of TV series, that one early edition where he'd get like tomorrow's newspaper a day early, which how time locked is that scenario?
Right.
No one's getting newspapers.
Nobody gets them anymore.
I heard today's on a commercial while I was at work. Somebody said, look for our coupon in this Sunday's paper. And I was like, what? Who's getting coupons from a paper that's delivered on? Like, no one is doing that anymore. That used to be a huge thing. It's like, it did not happen. So he was on early edition before, and he was on a bunch of other ABC shows. But he became, like, if you think of Kyle Chandler or Friday Night Lights, you think of him as the head coach, right. Where in the movie version, it was Billy Bob Thornton, which there's not a lot of overlaps there. He's more like the old ball coach, and I don't think it would have been the same, love that people had for the coach when he was played by Kyle Chandler. So that's number 5 on the list. Number 4, we've already mentioned, which was Stargate SG-1. Stargate they did a great job of making a sci-fi show with very limited budget. The reason that the movie, I think, is closer to the series isn't the content, because the series does a great job expanding the world and creating compelling stories, but there was always the issue of we don't really have enough money to make this sci-fi show look like it should. And Stargate, the movie, looked really, really good. It was a good special effects star, movie. So that's the thing I think that keeps them a little bit closer together. Also, Kurt Russell as the sort of badass, tough as nails, like action hero feels a little bit more plausible than Richard Dean Anderson. I mean, we all love Richard Dean Anderson, who played, grew up as MacGyver, and then he became the Stargate sort of talisman through all the series. That makes a little bit more sense, but Stargate took this great idea, and what I really loved about the film and the concept was you could go anywhere with it. And they did. They had 3 or 4 different series. There's Stargate SG-1, you had Stargate Atlantis. There was SGU, which was set within the same universe, but takes it an entirely different thing. Now they're like stuck on a ship and they can't get back to Earth, and they can only go to visit other places. And it was more of a like intense, like stressful show. And then Atlantis was a little bit more, episodic, but also we're talking about the bigger worlds and expanding on, the idea of human landmarks in history being tied to aliens. Sorry if any of this is spoiler alert. All this stuff came out like 20 years ago, so you don't get a spoiler alert on that. Sorry. So Stargate SG-1 and the entire series that came after it clocked in at number 4. Number 3 actually got remade twice based on the first movie at the beginning. The movie, which came out in, my numbers are all thrown off. The movie came out in, so it was originally called La Femme Nikita.
Oh, Nikita.
Yes, right. So it came out in 1990. Luke Besson, who would go on to do The Point of No Return. He did The Fifth Element. He did a highly underrated Valerian and the Planet of or City of a Thousand Planets, which I still think is quite good and just a beautiful film. And Rihanna does a great job as well. Sarkara Delinger, the main character, the guy Valerian, he's just really pretty, and that's about all he's got going for him. Kind of try to play it like he was Han Solo, and you can only be Han Solo to pull that off. But super good movie. So La Femme Nikita came out in 1990. It was first remade into a series in 1997, starring Peta Wilson. And I remember this one because it was on USA.
Yes.
Often late at night, and USA in the mid to like during the 90s was my like guilty pleasure that I would watch when I was supposed to be asleep, and I would keep it really low and listen and watch, like
that was Silk Stockings era too.
Silk Stockings, La Femme Nikita, the bicycle cops in it was like Pacific Blue.
Yeah, wasn't that Mario Lopez?
I think yes. I think Mario Lopez was on that originally. So I loved these movies, and I always thought like I wasn't supposed to be watching them because they were just a little bit more risque than what my parents would normally watch. This was not Lois and Clark: The Adventures of Superman. This was La Femme Nikita, which sounds a little bit more dangerous. The 1997 TV series is excellent. I really enjoyed it. It twists on the old movie a little bit more. Of course, it's a complete remake, so it doesn't act as a sequel or a prequel in any way. It's completely remade. The series was so good that they redid it again in 2010.
Yep.
This time just calling it Nikita and focusing on the main character is played by Maggie Q, who is arguably the third best Die Hard villain in the entire Die Hard trilogy. She's the best sidekick, but the third best overall villain in I've also got that written down somewhere. So La Femme Nikita, which would go on to be La Femme Nikita and Nikita, is number 3 on our list. Number 2 is, of course, Buffy, which we've already extolled some of the virtues of, and then had a little side mission to go talk about Doug Jones as well. And we come back to the main quest.
Side note, Angel from Buffy and Angel. David Boreanaz is from Buffalo.
Oh, he looks very hardy. Don't know where to go with that other than to say he's a very hardy man. Then we get to the number 1 series that had a movie first, but the series is a complete remake. And it is arguably one of the top TV series of all time. So this may be dating myself, which is weird because that sounds strange. But when I was a kid, I remember that this TV series, which ran from 1972 to 1983, I remember it in reruns, and it was always on in the afternoon. It was appointment television, even when it was in reruns. And it was one of those things that would come on often when it would come on in the middle of the afternoon or right after the nightly news sometimes. So we had some channels would do Cheers right after the news, and some would do MASH. So MASH was a movie that came out first and was 1970 and was a huge success. The movie version of MASH won Academy Awards. It won the famed Palme d'Or at the 1970 Cannes Film Festival, 5 Academy nominations, including Best Picture. It won for Best Adapted Screenplay. It was considered a huge hit. So you had Don Sutherland, Elliot Gould, Tom Skerritt, who's the guy from Top Gun. You'll recognize him. He's got the mustache. Robert Duvall, Rene Auberjonois, who would go on to be on Deep Space Nine.
Benson.
So that's what. Yeah, Benson as well. I guess that was a big show. It was no Deep Space Nine. But in 1972, MASH started as a series. And I think a lot of people, when they think of MASH, think of Alan Alda and Wayne Rogers and Loretta Swift and Larry Linville and Harry Morgan and Jamie Farr. And like when you think of MASH, you think of the TV series.
Yeah.
Even though the movie itself won Academy Awards and was hugely known. I, as a kid from the 80s, who was born 11 years after the movie came out, didn't realize it was a movie until I was in my 20s. I just thought of MASH as the television series, and it was always referred to as one of the highest rated, best loved series. And I remember when Seinfeld was getting close to its final episode and Cheers was getting close to its final episode. So we're talking like there's 6-7 years between those two events. Each time when they were talking about Cheers having its final episode, it was sort of like, will this be the one that finally breaks the record for the most watched TV series, TV finale ever? Because MASH held the record. And I believe they still do to this day in terms of when you look at like rating share. Not number of eyeballs, but their share of how many people were watching. And Cheers couldn't beat it. And Seinfeld, which might be one of the worst final episodes in any series, couldn't beat it. It was an iconic, it's considered one of the greatest television series, period. So it has to be number one when we're talking about movies that became television series and completely changed everyone's perspective or became the number one thing you thought of when you thought of that brand.
I applaud your list. Kudos to you on your list, but can I give you an honorable mention? And one that
Yes.
you probably wouldn't watch because of the content of it, but the TV show
Ooh, can I guess?
is phenomenal. Yes.
Does it start with a P?
No, what were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say Parenthood. Parenthood was another one
Oh,
that, like, it definitely, it's not for me, but that one definitely was considered for the list. But I thought we were going to say the same thing, but I was totally wrong. So we'll cut that out in post.
I was going to say Hannibal.
Oh, yeah. So I did consider Hannibal.
Now, I wasn't sure if that's one you watched or would watch or whatever.
No, it's not one that I have seen because I've seen like Silence of the Lambs. I've seen Red Dragon. Don't know that I've seen the one that came out before all those. Silence of the Lambs is actually a sequel to. Trying to remember the guy. He's the main character. Isn't Hannibal in that one? It's the cop. But yeah, I considered it. But I guess I just couldn't put it on my list because, again, I haven't seen enough of it.
I have to say, and I didn't realize it was so long ago. It started in 2013, which I feel like I was just watching it like 2 years ago, but it's been since 2013. It was on for a couple of years, and Mads Mikkelsen plays Hannibal.
Yeah.
And so it's basically the early relationship between Hannibal Lecter and a young criminal FBI profiler who played by Hugh Dancy. His name's Will Graham. And just like Hannibal is kind of obsessed with Clarice, he's kind of obsessed with Will Graham. But it's Hannibal before, he's locked up. He's like a doctor and he's, very prestigious. And Mads Mikkelsen plays such a phenomenal multi-dimension character that you're just completely drawn in. And I hate that it only had like a couple of seasons because they were really building on something, and then I guess it just kind of fell flat.
Yeah, you could only go so. I mean, the funny thing is how many times we've got, like right now we've got Prodigal Son,
which reminds me so much of when I first, and I watched that. I love it because of Michael Sheen, who's another phenomenal actor. But when I first started watching it, I was like, this is nothing but Hannibal with a twist that Hannibal's his dad.
Yeah, that's like the twist.
Yeah.
He is incredible in Doctor Strange too, Mads Mikkelsen. Which Doctor Strange I feel gets forgotten in the pantheon of the Marvel movies because there's so many. But that movie is highly underrated and has a great character arc for just about everybody. Even like the bad guys, like you're like, okay, I can kind of get where they're coming from. Like it's it's a very nuanced film when you're talking about sorcerers and magic.
It is. I'm just not big on Benedict Cumberbatch.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of him in there.
He's just not one of those draw me in type actors. So I feel like maybe if it was a different actor, I would have been one, because I love all of the Marvel's Avenger movies.
Mm-hmm.
That is my least favorite.
Really?
Yeah. And it is a good movie. I don't like Benedict Cumberbatch.
That's fair. Like I think that the first season of Sherlock is arguably the best season, like best limited series ever made.
And the thing is, I liked Sherlock too. So the writing, he gets really great parts and the writing is really good. I just find him annoying.
That's fair. I mean, when there's somebody like that, it's hard to separate them from their movies. There's just somebody that rubs you wrong. You're like, I can't get over that. Yeah. For some reason, like, I think it's mostly just pure jealousy, but Tobey Maguire's the same way for me.
So are you gonna watch the new Spider-Man because he's gonna be in it?
Oh yeah, because it'll just definitively prove to everyone that Tom Holland is a much better Spider-Man than anyone else, and there should never be an argument ever. You can argue about who's number 2. That's fine. You take you Andrew Garfield people, you go over there. Your Tobey Maguire people over there. Tom Holland is number 1.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, no, I was so incredibly jealous. The 2 roles that I wanted to play more than anything when I was in high school, and I dreamed about someday being an actor and being in a major motion picture. I wanted to be Anakin Skywalker, and I wanted to be Spider-Man. And that's why I actually don't feel bad. I don't hate Hayden Christensen because somebody had to dive on that script grenade he was given. So I'm glad it was him and not me, but I'm super jealous of Tobey Maguire. I can admit that.
It takes a big man to admit that.
I think I'm taller than him.
All right. So is that the A-side?
That is the A-side. The top 5 TV series that first started out at movies but didn't function as a prequel or sequel. And again, I'll make that into an acronym at some point.
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on, Adam. We can't forget our shout outs. We can't forget.
Oh, that's right.
Let's see. Where do we want to shout out this week? Let's start with other countries, because the fact that people in other countries listen to us is just so cool. In Singapore, Central Singapore Community Development Council. Hello.
Awesome.
In Italy, Emilia Romagna. I sound like such an American right now. Romagna.
They in Italia.
Romagna. Emilia Romagna. So if you're from there and you're listening,
is this a person's name or is this a city?
It's a city.
Because I would legitimately believe that was a person. Emilia Romagna.
Romagna. Emilia Romagna. That's how it's spelled. If you're from there, please correct me, and I apologize, but thank you so much for listening to us.
I always worry sometimes when we do these that we just offend the people who are listening because we can't pronounce the cities that they're from.
I'm trying. I'm really trying.
No, I know. It's in the best intention.
It is. In the UK, we've got, of course, England, Northern Ireland, Wales, British Columbia, Canada, Nova Scotia. Thank you for listening. Closer to home in Kentucky, Smiths Grove, Shepherdsville, Sonora. In Minnesota, your home state, Detroit Lakes and Rochester. Also in Texas, Arlington and Mesquite.
They got some good barbecue there.
That is the good barbecue.
I've read that on a bottle.
In Illinois, we've got Country Club Hills and New Albany. Also Kansas, Wichita, Little Rock, Arkansas, Little Rock. Mm-hmm. And in Louisiana, Shreveport. Where's New Orleans? Come on, Nola. We love you.
I don't know. They got so much good food and music, and it's like, why would you be sitting down listening to a podcast when you could just go like down the street and hear amazing music and performers?
Not right now. It's quarantine, so they can listen.
That's all right. Who knows what's going on in New Orleans, though?
Again, thank you all so much for joining us, because Adam and I know we just love to do this each week, and it's just so much fun having you along. If you would like to support the show, you can do it in several ways. You can buy us a coffee. It's buymeacoffee.com/A-side-B-side-pod. Also merch. We always talk about, especially for women, but it goes for everybody. Bad vibes, trust your gut. And so we've got a couple of shirts now that say that. Bad vibes save lives, and trust your guts. They're probably nuts. Those are our newest additions to the merch store. A-side, B-side podcast.square.site. We are on Twitter. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. You can follow us there. You can interact with us. We will. Adam will just like whatever you say, but I will actually converse with you. Adam's version of conversing is liking.
Well, if I didn't say I like that, now I'm just saying it twice. It's redundant.
Or another thing that Adam will do is just send back a 100 if you post something. And if Adam sends a 100, then he really liked it.
Yeah, that's 100 likes. Like, I like this 100 times.
All right. So, this one is on New Year's. So happy New Year. And 2021, here is to a much better year than 2020. Some people are saying 2020 was just the precursor. It was the prelude. I'm knocking on wood and like saying the prayers and throwing salt over my shoulder and doing all the things.
Burning sage.
Yeah, burning sage, everything to make sure.
A young priest and an old priest.
Just sprinkling holy water everywhere. I mean, get out of here, 2020, and take the bad juju with you.
Yeah.
Oh, man. If you have any questions or any stories that you would like to share with us, maybe you have a movie that you absolutely love that it doesn't even have to relate to what Adam's been talking about, or you have a hometown story that you'd love to, like a hometown homicide that you'd like to share with us, or you want me to look into it, would love to hear from you. You can also leave us a voicemail on our Anchor page. So let us know. We would love to hear from you.
And Brooke, I will say that I have had somebody reach out to me with a local true crime story that they want us to talk about. So I will share that with you offline. But
are you going to do the true crime this time and I do the movie?
I'm thinking maybe that's what we do.
Okay.
But like, I got to figure out like all the details and stuff. So I didn't want to forget again, because one of our listeners who suggested this story to me has asked several times if I've mentioned it to you, and I keep forgetting. So now I'm doing it live on air, so they will know that I'm not forgetting.
Now we all get to hold you accountable.
I need to be held accountable for so many things. But this will help.
All right. So there we go. That has been another A-side, B-side podcast. Thanks, Adam, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Brooke.
As always, thank you for listening to A-Side, B-Side podcast. If you enjoy the show, please, if you don't mind, head on over to Apple and leave us a rating or a review. And if you'd like to continue to support the podcast, you can do so by heading on over to Patreon, or you can buy us a coffee, as well as buying merch on our website, asidebsidepodcast.square.site. The warmest of wishes and the happiest of holidays to you this Christmas season. From Adam and I at A-Side B-Side Podcast, please remember to wear your mask, social distance if you're around people that don't live in your household, and just be safe and happy this Christmas season. Thanks again from us here at A-Side B-Side Podcast.